today's webinar will be about career pathways in and out of academia. As you know, the title is What Comes After the PhD? And so to discuss this topic, we'll have a panel with 7 fantastic guests, each one of them with a very unique pathway, some within academia, some who have transitioned to industry, and some who have been back and forth. So we're all very excited to hear. I certainly am. So all of our guests bring a very unique experience that really showcase the multiplicity of what it means to be successful in and out of academia. This webinar will run a little differently from what we've been used to. So we will not have a formal presentation. There will be no slides. Instead we'll have 1.5 hour, roughly, long interactive conversation between the panel and you, the audience. Sorry? Oh, I thought somebody said something. Okay, I'll continue. This conversation will be moderated by Professor Jason Mattingley. Jason is Foundation Chair in Cognitive Neuroscience at the University of Queensland, where he holds joint appointments with the Queensland Brain Institute and the School of Psychology. He and his team use a range of neuroimaging and brain stimulation techniques, including fMRI, EEG, MEG, TMS, and TDCS. He's a fellow of a number of societies, including the Academy of Social Sciences in Australia, the Association for Psychological Science, and the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research. And of course, he's also a past chair of OHBM Australia and has been really instrumental in shaping our chapter to what it is today. Jason knows a lot about the multiplicity of career pathways and success, what success means, as he's been a wonderful mentor for many early career scientists, myself included. So Jason, let's talk about what comes after the PhD.
All right, thanks, Marta. And let me just pass on a personal message of congratulations to you on taking over as chair of OHBM Australia and your team. And also to thank Alex and his team for doing such a fantastic job of running OHBM Australia and growing the numbers. It's such an exciting group to be a part of. So I've made a slide just showing the names of the people who we have involved today. So immediately I'm disobeying the orders to not have any slides. And in fact, I should say, Marta, that I sort of made an executive decision earlier today. I was approached by a couple of members of the panel who indicated that they would like to have just one slide or a maximum of 2, and so I relented and said that would be okay. So I'm sorry to immediately undermine your authority, but just in case panel members were getting worried that they couldn't show their slide, I'm giving them license to do that now, and I'll face Marta's wrath later. So let me just try and share my screen here, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about what we have planned. So maybe let's have a look. Now, you seeing the right view there, Marta? You seeing my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, okay, let's... Well, this is not a very auspicious start. Let's go back.
I think these are my special powers of no slides.
I'm going to try one more time. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, there we go. It's working. Perfect.
It's working? Okay, good. Let me turn on. You seeing that?
Yep.
Terrific. So as Marta said, the idea of the webinar is to ask this question, what comes after the PhD, and to hear from people who have gone through various different pathways. So I will not have much to say at the beginning. What I am going to do is to invite our panelists, and you can see their names there: Maria, Farshid, Shuan, Natalia Egorova, Michael, Natalia Bielczyk, and Phil Ward. I'll give each of them sort of 5 minutes just to introduce themselves very, very briefly, and to say something about their pathway into what they are doing now. And then once we've gone through those introductions, we will have our panel discussion. And I've got a set of questions. I'm not going to show them in advance, but I do have, I think there might be 8 questions to pose to our panel members to help focus the discussion. and we'll see how we go. I think I might leave it open for people to just answer questions as they feel the urge. But if we find that we're hearing from the same people over and over, I might tap others who are being quieter on the shoulder and ask for their opinions as well. But we do have 90 minutes. So this is the order. The reason that Phil is down the bottom is that he has a last minute meeting he has to attend, and so he'll be joining us a little bit late, so I put him down the bottom. So let me, without further ado, invite Maria to share her screen and to tell us a little bit about her pathway, and then we'll move on from there. And let me just stop sharing. There we go. And so, Maria,
Hi.
over to you.
Sure, thank you. So I don't have any slides, so I'll just briefly go through what I've been doing. So I'm originally from Portugal, where I studied physics engineering, same as Marta. And then I moved to London in the UK to do my PhD in neuroimaging. That's how my neuroimaging life started. So during my PhD, I learned about machine learning. So it's something I didn't study. I hadn't studied before, but I really liked it. I wanted to learn more, and I knew for sure that I wanted to do something related to machine learning after my PhD. So my first postdoc was in a machine learning and neuroimaging lab at UCL. And initially I worked with the software Pronto. So we developed it from scratch, and that was kind of my first postdoc project in Janaína Mourão Miranda's lab at UCL. After I think maybe a year and a half, I thought I needed a bit of freshness, so I moved to King's, where I did another postdoc in machine learning and neuroimaging. But at that point, I began maybe wondering if academia was for me or not, but I wasn't really actively looking for a job when I came across this job advert looking for someone to do machine learning and neuroimaging in a company in London. So I applied. I got the job. I was actually on maternity during that time. And so after coming back from maternity, I moved the first time from academia to industry. And I worked for a bit more than a year in a small company, a CRO, so a contract research organization. So we worked for big pharmaceutical companies, and we did basically their imaging studies. I did enjoy my first experience in industry, but the company was small. There wasn't a lot of space for me to do more machine learning, which is what I wanted to do. So after a while, I kind of started missing academia again, and I decided to go back for another postdoc. And I went back to the same lab at UCL, the first one where I did my first postdoc with Janaína. But I knew that it was just a matter of time before leaving again. I was kind of just enjoying my last moments in academia, and I was open about it with Janaína, and she was fine with it. So I stayed for I think a bit less than 2 years again as a postdoc, again at UCL. And then some personal decisions led me to apply for a position in Cambridge. So I wanted to move out of London, basically. It was a big city. It was, at the time, it didn't feel right. So I got the job at MathWorks in Cambridge, and that's where I am right now. And very briefly, I am a technical support engineer. So, well, an advanced support engineer, that's my role. And what that means is I support customers doing machine learning and deep learning using MATLAB. And I also do software development for the Deep Learning Toolbox, and a bit of other projects, always around deep learning, machine learning, and data, because that's kind of my background. And this is where I am at the moment, and I'll see what the future holds. But that's basically it in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maria. That was
No
terrific. Very nice insights and keeping right on time. You set the standard beautifully.
All right. Good.
So thanks very much. And I'll now ask Farshid if he would mind taking his turn to tell us a little bit about himself and his journey and where he is now. And Farshid, feel free to show a slide if you want to do that, but there's no pressure to do that. It's totally up to you. And good to see you, by the way. It's been a long time since I last saw you, Farshid.
Thank you, Jason. It's great to see you too, and all the other familiar faces from Australia. It's so exciting. I don't have any slides as well, so I'll give you a brief background about myself. I was born and raised in Tehran, Iran, where I did my undergrad in computer science, hardware engineering, and towards the end of my undergrad, I got interested in signal processing. So I did a master in digital electronics, mainly on signal and image processing. By that time, I was working on a medical imaging that got me really interested in the medical imaging field in general. So I applied for different PhD positions. I was also very interested in microprocessors from the hardware aspect. And initially, I got the PhD offer from UNSW. I moved there, I started working on multiprocessor system on chip, but the PhD was half funded. And then I was lucky to get an IPRS to come and join University of Queensland to do PhD in neuroimaging. And I honestly, I think it's one of the greatest neuroimaging PhD anyone can ask for. We were enrolled through QBI, but we were doing our PhD in Center for Advanced Imaging. So we had the luxury of learning from the experts from both sides, the neuroscientists and imaging people, really learning what is it that we are imaging. During that time, I did a part-time job for Queensland University of Technology, working on analyzing MRI, and then another part-time job was working for Marcus Bart on ultra-high field R7 using R7 Tesla scanner, and then another part-time job for Linda Richard. And during my PhD, I did an internship at UCLA. By the time I got there, the laboratory of neuroimaging already moved to USC. So I did my internship at USC, University of Southern California. I really enjoyed it, the lab and the work, so I decided to go there for a postdoc. 2-3 years into my postdoc, I applied for faculty position on the same institute and started a small lab. I was lucky to get a couple NIH grants that helped me to grow my lab and almost grow it, I think, to 12%. It was starting to get momentum, but at the same time, I started to feel few things about academia that kind of, I don't know, this discouraged me from continuing, although I really was enjoying some of the other aspects. And I wasn't really actively looking for a job in industry, but I was contacted by someone at LinkedIn, pointing me to a job at Regeneron in pharmaceutical company. I found the job very interesting, interviewed, and got the offer early this year and joined Regeneron since March. And currently I'm a senior staff scientist at Regeneron in the clinical imaging team. And my job is twofold: supporting the clinical trial and also continuing doing imaging research for supporting the clinical trial. And I'm very happy to be here.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Farshid, for sharing your journey up until the present point. Very interesting. And already we're seeing some commonalities and differences in pathways between you and Maria so far. Next up, we have Xuan. And I think, is Xuan with us? If so, then
I am.
I'll pass. There you are. I can see you now. I'll pass over to you, and again, feel free if you have a slide, feel free to show it. But we're quite happy just to listen to what you have to say as well. So over to you.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you to the organising committee for inviting me to this panel, because I think it's going to be extremely interesting. I have no slides. I am a typical academic, I think, but also quite atypical at the same time. I was born and bred in Brisbane, and my whole academic career has been in Brisbane, and more specifically, the University of Queensland. So I have been at UQ my whole academic life. I did my undergraduate here, my honours, my PhD, my postdocs, and I'm a group leader now at UQ. So, honours, undergrad honours was a really interesting time for me, doing science and trying to figure out which way was the best way to go. Did some biomedical science, some neuroscience, did some developmental biology, because I thought, oh, the pracs looked pretty interesting. I was terrible at chemistry, so didn't really follow that track. But come honours and PhD, I decided that neuroscience would be my thing. So I've trained as a basic scientist in the field of neuroscience. And I think when you think about a typical basic science PhD, you're in the lab day in, day out, pipetting liquids, doing Western blots, doing all that sort of thing, and nothing works in your PhD. But that's okay, you get your PhD anyway after pushing through. And I think it was at the end of my PhD that I realized that even though I really, really enjoyed the science, there was still something missing. My reason for going into science was really sort of adventure through discovery. And something happened to me at the end of my PhD, in that I lost my mother to cancer. And so when I thought about a postdoctoral research career, I had sort of been tossing between whether to move into cancer or to stay in neuroscience. But one thing I did learn from watching my mother pass from a terminal illness was that I'm obviously not the only person in the world going through this sort of loss, and that there are a lot of people who are living with diseases that have devastating impact. And through research, we should be able to change the story for people. You know, the stories that they tell, people shouldn't have to say that they lost someone to a disease. And so for my postdoc, I decided that I wanted to do something that was a bit more clinically focused. And I took my first PhD under the mentorship of 2 neurologists at the Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital. So yes, I decided to stay in neuroscience, but moved more to a clinical focus. And I think at that time, I didn't look back, because there was something with working directly with humans living with terminal diseases that changed my outlook on science completely, because there was so much more that we could ask that was more relevant to people who are living with a certain condition. And since that time, I've picked up 3 sequential fellowships to look at unique aspects, I think, of motor neuron disease, which is a neurodegenerative disease that most people think is associated with the loss of neurons. But the research that we do in my lab is a bit more holistic. We look more at human physiology rather than just the brain. And what I'd managed to do with working with patients, and I think it's something that I wish I'd been able to experience during my PhD, was talk to people living with the disease, take that knowledge back into the lab, so reverse translate it into the lab, and then forward translate that back into the clinic. And so over the years, working with patients, we've been able to develop, or at least I've developed a program that's sort of quite a large umbrella program, in that I have an arm where we work with patients living with disease. There's an arm where we work with people in the community to try and figure out what the community wants from our research and to deliver on that. I work with basic models of disease, so whether that's cells or mice, but then I also use human stem cells for disease models. So it's quite a broad program, and all of that is really designed to bring things back to the patient. And so that's where we are at the moment. I'm a group leader at the Australian Institute for Bioengineering and Nanotechnology. And all of my PhD students who work in the team all get the opportunity to work across the clinic and the basic science lab. And through everything we've done in the last 5 years here at the AIBN, which has been really great for me, is to be able to translate what we initially saw in patients into a clinical trial, which was just started in June. So that's me.
Wonderful, very exciting. That sounds fantastic. So interesting. Thanks so much, Xuan, for those insights, and it'll be good to hear your responses to some of the questions that I've got coming up. Good. So we're right on time, which is terrific. And the next person we're going to hear from is Natalia Egorova. If Natalia is there,
Yep.
please feel free. And I see you're sharing your screen, so go for it.
Okay. So I come from the far east of Russia, and my first science degree was the PhD. So I did a PhD in cognitive neuroscience at the University of Cambridge, and then for my first postdoc moved to Boston. I then did a very brief postdoc at the University of Geneva and ended up in Australia at the Florey Institute of Neuroscience and Mental Health. And then finally, where I am now is the University of Melbourne, where I started my pain and cognition neuroimaging lab, run a group of about 10 people. So it looks like I was traveling the world and trying to collect badges of how many continents I can cover. But in fact, it was a little bit complicated by life. So I met my future husband at the University of Cambridge. And then when he got a postdoc at MIT, I thought I'd follow and had to find a job necessarily in Boston. I then heard that his whole lab is moving to Switzerland, so I had to find a job in Switzerland. And then when we settled there for a couple of months, he got a permanent position at Melbourne University. So naturally, I also had to find a position at Melbourne, at the Florey. And obviously, it was quite a few family relocations. There were some issues with grant and eligibility. For example, in Australia, you can't apply for a lot of medical or philanthropic grants if you're not a permanent resident. And then when I was about to start my lab properly, I also had a baby. So lots of life happened. So when the academic CV looks very smooth and the universities are well selected, it doesn't mean that it all comes very naturally. But I can say that it's all possible. What's important, and I really thought about it from the beginning, is that I build my own research curriculum. At the university, you have the certain courses that you follow. And when you're finished with your PhD, there's no more curriculum that's built for you. So you have to create it. So coming from the linguistics background, I did my PhD in neurobiology of language, but then I thought I had enough of language for a while and I wanted to learn more about the brain. So I switched quite dramatically and joined an experimental pain lab, a neuroimaging, clinical neuroimaging lab. That was very useful later on when I joined a stroke lab doing a lot of clinical neuroimaging again. So all that looks patchy, but I always had the idea that my goal as a postdoc, especially early postdoc, is to create a set of tools and skills that I will later need for my own research lab. And I tried to find my niche, and now I'm running an experimental pain lab, so with lots of fancy pain equipment, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy that, and I still am truthful to my love of language, so I do a lot of language projects and try to link them with pain methodology and do a lot of language work in stroke. And I do a lot of clinical neuroimaging as well to also diversify access to medical and more basic grants. So I'd say that for me, it was really important to build my CV around life and also about around my interest. And I hope that I've achieved that with the current lab. And let's see what happens next. That's it.
That's great. Thanks so much, Natalia. Very interesting journey. You've been all over the world. Terrific. So again, we're right on time, and I think the next person to introduce themselves will be Michael Breakspear. So Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Marta. Can you see me? Because I can't see me, but that's not a problem.
We can see you.
Okay, right. Well, I have a straight but crooked path in that I, unlike some of our colleagues having interesting and challenging journeys around the world, I grew up in Sydney, went to the University of Sydney and got stuck there for a long time in a state of intellectual paralysis, doing various degrees and not being able to let go of my interest in mathematics, basically. So I did do medicine, and I was humming along as a psych reg, and still doing mathematics, which was a little bit strange. And so at some stage, I just enrolled in a PhD. And I have to say, for at least 3/4 of my career, that's the sort of story, you know, just rolling along and doing things and maybe being in the right place at the right time, in the sense that sort of when I started my PhD, there wasn't a lot of a role for mathematics in neuroscience. And these days, computational neuroscience, dynamical systems, statistics, it's the thing of the day. And I've just stumbled into the field like an Australian stumbling into the bar looking for a good drink. So I have to say there has not really been a lot of strategy in my career choices. I've just pursued what I'm interested in and continue to try and carve out as much of my life as possible to do that. That's why I still find it a successful week when I get to do some mathematics and some computer programming, and not just, you know, huge amounts of emails and admin and all of that other stuff that comes your way, as you know, Jason, when you stick around and become a little bit more senior. Some of the things that do fire me up, though, and hearing some of the other stories, I've always had an interest in mental health, and I've always seen it as being rather undervalued by society and by the medical profession to some degree. And I guess every time I've had a degree of melee in my career, something's come along, someone said, oh, well, what's this stuff about mental health research? And then I've gotten really fired up. And I mean, one thing, and I think that's important in research, that you have, first of all, a lot of stuff that you're interested in that you could still do. And second of all, some fire in your belly. And, you know, I moved into an institute with a big cancer focus at one stage. And a new director then once said, well, why mental health research? You know, we're basically doing cancer. And that was a great thing, because I reflected on it and I thought, well, you know, people with schizophrenia, and I'm working as a mental health clinician, you know, they're sort of sleeping rough in their early 20s, early 30s. There's not a lot of great treatments. There's not a lot of great research going on. You know, it's just not right. And so after that discussion, I became much more passionate again about focusing my fortune on doing mental health research. And that's kind of where I am at the moment, still doing that. For clinicians, I have to say, I do feel very lucky. I've trained a lot of PhDs and postdocs in basic science, and it is a rough game. And if I actually had to leave research, it would break my heart, I can tell you. But I do know I have a medical career, and I think that's always been something that I've been very fortunate about, that it maybe has allowed me not to get too embroiled and too worried about some of the politics that have come along in my life. Yeah, anyway, I know that that's a jumbled story, and that's where I am at the moment.
Great, thanks, Michael. Really interesting insights there. I particularly love the bit that things were not necessarily planned, but you sort of stumbled from one thing to another. I think that story certainly amongst many established academics would be pretty common, actually. Good. So let's move right along. We're nearly there with our introduction. So I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Natalia Bielczek next. And so Natalia, will hand over to you. Feel free to share your screen if you have a slide. Otherwise, we'll just have a listen to what you have to say.
Thank you so much again for the kind invitation, and I would like to share my screen indeed. Yes. Briefly about me quickly. So my academic background is quite broad. I was born and raised in Poland, and I was studying at the University of Warsaw. I did 3 different master's degrees. I was studying quite a lot. So I graduated from psychology, mathematics, and physics. And then I still didn't have enough of studies. So I also completed some quick study program at in MBA before going to the grad school. But I was at that point, even though our business development seemed to be fun, I was falling in love with science. So I didn't really have doubts that I should go for grad school and I should go for a PhD in neuroscience. And that's what I did. So I moved to the Netherlands, and I completed a PhD in computational neuroscience. It took me a while, but it was quite a challenge, but I graduated last year. But already at the end of my contract, which was in the end of 2017, I started hesitating what to do next. I first wanted to take a break and then come back to the postdoc, but then I developed in a different direction. So what I'm doing right now, first of all, I own a tiny company here in the Netherlands, Welcome Solutions. And I blog and I authored a book about post-PhD career paths. And it's called What is Out There for Me? The Landscape of Post-PhD Career Tracks. So that was my first book ever. I was very excited because I was always dreaming about writing books. So that was actually a good occasion to write one because the topic was also close to my heart. I'm also very excited about this recent project. We just deployed an aptitude test that helps professionals who are thinking, especially academics, who are thinking about changing career paths in finding the right path in the job market and finding the right way. It's called the Odyssey test. Just arrived 4 weeks ago. And I also host a tiny YouTube channel, so please feel welcome to visit us. And also we are always looking for interesting guests to talk to. So hopefully we can, if you would like to join us, then we are open to chat, and that would be awesome. Just briefly about my reasons for not pursuing the academic career track. As mentioned before, well, I first took a gap year. I didn't really think about leaving academia at that point. I was just thinking about giving myself a chance to recover from the physical exhaustion. I was working way too much during my PhD. I was not only working on my PhD, I also bought a house. I was doing makeover, and so I was working physically after working hours, and I was spending time on many different things, not just PhD, and I was just exhausted. So I wanted to just take time and think about my future a little bit more before and just rest before I come back to doing a postdoc. But then I realized that there are different tribes in the job market, and they have different cultures. And when I flock around young entrepreneurs, I kind of feel like I understand their sense of humor, and I feel like home in a way. So in the end, I realized that I might actually fit that tribe, and that might be a place for me. And I made my decision. I got the conclusion that probably I was born to be a company owner, and probably this is the way for me. And academia was never meant to be in the long run. So just briefly, what I think was the most beneficial for me from my whole PhD, I think that for my current activities, first of all, the fact that I became very patient, that really helps when you have a company, and of course being independent and also acknowledging people. I think these are the values that help a lot in business development, and also writing skills. As an academic, you write a lot. You write in different situations, different types of texts, and that helps greatly when you develop a company as well, because you are in the process of writing for the whole day almost, from your products to your communications to writing emails. It's pretty much like writing the whole day. So this was very useful. And what I learned also while looking for my new way of living, first of all, it always starts from you. So you have to really ask yourself, who am I? What am I really good at, and what do I really enjoy? And also, you can have a job that hits all the marks. You can find that way where you feel like you exploit all your strengths at once, and you really enjoy what you're doing. But it takes time. The more requirements you have, the more time it will take you to find the right path. For me, it took me a while. It took me years, but I'm very happy about what I'm doing right now. And lastly, what is the biggest pro and con from my current occupation? So having a little company is struggling, because there are all kinds of struggles. Even yesterday evening, I just woke up this morning, and yesterday evening I got some really bad news about the trademark application I submitted. So there are good and bad news every day. So it's not always easy, but I think the one con is that it's very unpredictable. It's when you have a company, it's like every day is different, and another calamity might happen, another company might sue you. Like there are so many different things that can go wrong, but the biggest plus is the same. It's unpredictable, and amazing people come to your life, and you pull off new projects. You have space for creativity, and it's really, I think I made the right choice. And I would like to recommend business development to PhDs, because of course not everyone has a personality that actually fits this career path. But if you would like to try, please ask me questions, because I'm on the bright side. I really feel that this is a great career to choose. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Natalia. I really like the fact that the biggest plus and the biggest minus of your job is unpredictability. That's a really nice idea, really nice sentiment. Good. So we're up to last but not least, our last person to present their introduction, and I'm hoping that Phil has left his meeting and is with us now. Phil, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, excellent, and I can see you as well. So you probably missed the introduction, but I've just asked people to spend 4 or 5 minutes saying a little bit about their journey and what they do at the moment before we go to the open discussion. So I'll pass over to you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, and apologies for being late. So a bit about my background. My undergrad was at La Trobe University, looking at physics and maths, and I went on from there to work on database algorithms and all of that really exciting stuff, as you can imagine, before taking a grad role with CSIRO as a scientist. So at CSIRO, I worked on weather forecasting. I worked on environmental models, helping dam operators and farmers better plan their water usage. I worked with the Bureau of Meteorology to deploy the forecasting system to the nation. So if you ever go on the Bureau of Meteorology website and want a streamflow forecast, that's the system that the team that I was a part of built. It was a fantastic opportunity early in my career to have a real translation of science to real impact, to see people using it, to go through all those awful challenges of translation really early on, and real data really early on that I didn't collect, which was, got some stories and some wounds, some scars from that one. But unfortunately, due to the climate, the political climate, the funding for that kind of work was not going to be maintained. This was back in 2010, 2012. So I looked at a new career path and I sent a cold email to Gary Egan, who some of you may know, where I'm pretty sure I misspelt MBI, and said I'd like to do a PhD in something medical because you'll probably have funding and I'll probably have a career path. So we chatted. I started a PhD. I learned MRI and I worked in neuroscience. And my PhD was looking at veins in the brain, oxygenation, supply and demand, and a lot of methods work, because my only usable skills were really the physics and maths and a bit of programming. So it was very much in the method space, and I slowly moved into the applications and learnt more and more about the brain. After that, I started a postdoc in the same lab, or the same part of the university. Started working in PET imaging, doing a bit of radiation, looking at energetics in the brain, and some more modelling. Now, it was about this point that I met a bit of a conflict, and really there were 3 points to this, and they've all got equal priority, so don't look too far into the order. But the first one was very much on the impact of my work. I continually questioned whether the work I was doing had impact and whether it was worth it, worth the amount of time. If I got a grant, that means someone else missed out. And I was reading grants and they were fantastic. And, you know, who am I to take that money? And if I wasn't around, they would do it. And sometimes I'd get a paper in on time and scoop someone else, or sometimes they'd scoop me. And I thought, in the big scheme of things, if I wasn't here, the world just might find out the same information 2 days later. And someone else who I scooped would have a better CV and get more grants. But instead, I've taken another resource. And that continually played on my mind. That was really difficult for me. And it made any compromise for impact really hard to swallow. If I was given a KPI, if there was a suggestion to modify a study to be more aligned with nature, instead of aligned with a scientific question that I cared about, that might be really dry, might have been a parameter sensitivity or something like that, I really struggled to make those compromised decisions, and that hurts your career. That makes it really hard to win. And it's a very competitive field, as I'm sure you all know. So that was the first one. The second one was family. I had a young daughter at the time, and I really didn't have proper leave. Even when I was on leave, I was reviewing papers or rewriting grants. I didn't have proper weekends. I was worried about job security, to get a mortgage and a house, and where is my kid going to go to school and all that stuff. And I just wasn't sure. And the last one was sort of the environment. So I really struggled with the administration at universities and some of that bureaucracy. I really struggled when I had good people and often had good money as well, and couldn't tie those two things together and keep someone in the building because of some bureaucracy. And just, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, but there's lots of reasons to not like how universities are run, but there's also lots of reasons not to like how funding agencies operate. And sitting on every committee for diversity and equity, sitting on every committee for ECRs, trying to help things often doesn't help your state of mind. So with all those in mind, I got to a pretty bad place. My mental health was not great. I was not liking where I was. And a friend of mine contacted me one day and said, "Hey, I'm working at a bank. Do you want to come?" And they actually said, "What would it take for you to come join me?" And I said, "A 6-pack. That's where I'm at today. Come take me off the couch." But that said, I interviewed and I grilled my interviewers saying, "Why would I want to work for your bank?" Because I didn't know what I hated more at that point, academia or banks. And they had to win me over, right? It actually made for a really good interview experience. I don't recommend going in with that mindset. But on the day that I accepted that role and resigned from Monash, I got an NHMRC investigator grant. So that was a big double take. I won't go into that now, but feel free to ask questions. So what I do, so I took the job at NAB, which didn't exist before my interview, but one of my interviewers said, "Look, we'd probably give you the role that you're interviewing for, but we've got this other idea, you might be good for it." And it was research and development data scientist. It was a function they didn't have, but the idea was there's probably a lot of really cool stuff out there in genetics, in engineering, in medical, that would be relevant for us. New AI, new data science stuff. Can you just go to conferences? Can you read journals? Can you do a sniff test of companies that come to us with a brand new product and see if it's bullshit or not? So that was my role, which was awesome. I loved how open it was. It felt like I was doing the good parts of academia, running experiments and reading papers, but not being forced to publish anything. And then after about 18 months, I got a promotion, or I got offered another job in the bank. And I'm currently the manager of privacy technology and ethics in artificial intelligence. So a lot of my work is very, very similar, but it's looking at how do we enable safe usage of data? How do we make sure our models aren't biased? And a lot of that's about new algorithms, cryptography, and a lot of it's centered on journals again. So I won't go into any more detail than that, but hopefully that opens up for anyone who has questions in those particular areas later on to prompt me if you want more detail.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Phil. What an interesting journey you've had as well. All of the journeys have been so interesting and all completely different, which says something all by itself, I think. So look, the plan now, having heard those introductions, is to spend the next sort of 40 minutes or so having a discussion. And to provide some structure for that discussion, what I've done is put up some questions. Stefan has contributed to these, the committee's contributed to these. I think there are 8 questions altogether. We may spend more time on some than others, but it means that we have about 5 minutes to sort of talk through each one. And rather than sort of directing questions to individuals, if the panelists feel okay about this, I thought that I would just show each question and then people can kind of jump in initially. I'm not sure how well that will work, but let's see how we go. If you have a particular insight and you would like to contribute, then just sort of jump in. If we find that that's getting a bit anarchic, then maybe I'll have to sort of somehow take control and direct questions to individuals. But let's see how we go. I think the free form kind of way of answering questions might be the best initially. So let me just share my screen so that you can see those questions initially. Can you see the questions up there now? Yep, great. So here's number one. Question number one, thinking about the job that you have today, what are some of the skills you learned during your academic training, your PhD, let's say your postdoc as well, that you actually use now? And then the flip side of the coin, I guess, is what skills were you lacking when you started your current position, which on reflection you wish you had learned while you were training? So I guess you could answer either of those. They're two different questions, but two sides of the same coin. So do you have any thoughts about those? Things you use now that are really helpful, or things that you wish you'd learned when you had the chance while you were training? So I'll open it up. Don't be shy.
I'll kick off if no one else is going to.
Go ahead.
So I think sort of in both answer to both pieces, there were a few skills that I didn't realize I had and that I didn't make the most of because of that really came through moving into industry. And one of them is to handle scarcity. So in academia, you know, some of us have fantastic grants that cover absolutely everything. Most of us don't. We learn to work with people. We learn to leverage the capabilities we have, and we learn to roll up our sleeves and learn a new toolbox or a new skill or a new data collection to handle whatever environment we're in. And that's very much a skill that I just took for granted during my academic training and wasn't really aware of. And I wish I had have honed it more. I wish if I knew how important that was and how useful that would be in industry, I would have spent more time. I would have challenged myself to pick up more tools and more skills than I did otherwise, because it is just so valuable and such a differentiator between people who sit on their hands and say, I don't have money, or I don't have this, or I don't have that, and they're completely blocked to get nothing done.
Very interesting. Thanks, Phil. Any other one would like to add something to the conversation?
Yeah, I think, sorry, Jason. Following up on what Phil said, I think something I learned during my PhD, because I would say that I did my PhD in a poor lab, was to be very resourceful and to always look for ways to solve a problem. There's always a lot of problems when you're in a lab that doesn't have much funding. And there's always research questions you want to ask. So for me, it was always, who can I find who can help me, and how do I do that on my own? The worst that someone could do is say, no, sorry, I can't help you. And then you just go and find someone else. I think what I learned during my PhD was that resilience and that persistence just to do what it takes to get things done. And I think in my current position, what I reflect on and what I'd wished I had that I have now back then is just learning how to manage different people, because during my PhD I was quite young and naive, and I just go and ask someone and say, I need this, I want this, please give it to me. And now I realize, well, everyone's going to respond in a different way. So it's just being a bit more tactful in how you approach these things.
Thank you. Natalia, I think I see you speaking, but you're muted at the moment.
Sorry, could I also add a few
Yes.
words? For me, I think, again, I was studying a lot, but among all the topics I was studying, not too many things are what I'm using right now. I think the most important thing was the working ethic and professional ethic that developed during the PhD. And also what I learned is that academia is quite a small world, and sometimes it's better to let go of some of your expectations and go for compromises, because you will always meet the same people again, you know. So it's very important to walk away without any conflicts and keep friendly. And you know, there are always limited resources, but you have to know how to make friends even in these difficult conditions. And I think this is very useful in business. Like, you really have to, it's based on relations and trust, and you have to know how to build collaborations with people, even those who have kind of similar businesses and in similar space. You have to still collaborate to be successful, especially if you're very tiny and you're a beginner. So I think this was very useful. And what I wish I learned before, well, this is kind of maybe quite specific to business development, but I think there are very tiny details that can make or break your business. For instance, if you don't learn about SEO, then you're invisible online. And this is like very tiny detail, it seems, but in the long run, after years of doing business, it really makes difference whether or not your website is visible. And if you learn the rules at first, then it's like a compound interest. Then your website ranks better and better when you know the rules behind SEO, and then all of a sudden you become visible and you get a lot of outreach, etc. So there are very tiny details that can indeed like bring you like much farther or block you. So you have to learn these like nitty-gritty details, and I didn't know at first. So if I could do it again, bring myself back by 2 years, then I would learn a little bit more about the mechanics behind it. That's it.
Thanks, Natalia. Maybe we have time for one more person would like to say something about this question. Don't worry if you don't get a chance. There are other questions to come, but any other thoughts on this one?
Maybe I can just add that I was actually surprised when I took my first job in industry, how well prepared I was for the transition. I thought I had loads to learn, and actually I thought I was bringing quite a lot to the job, and I never felt that I was really lacking something that big. So I think, as other people said, I think we have great skills that we learned during our PhDs, our postdocs in academia, that are definitely extremely valuable in other jobs in industry. That's how I felt.
Great, that's very encouraging. Thanks, Maria. Okay, let's maybe move on to another question and get our panelists' thoughts on this one. So, thinking back to what you knew before you started in your current role, was there any mismatch between your expectations of the role and the reality? Some of you have touched on this a little bit already, but this idea of going into a role and thinking it'll be something, but actually it turns out perhaps to be something quite different. Or maybe there's a good match, I don't know, but it would be good to get people's thoughts on this one, particularly perhaps people we haven't heard from yet.
maybe
anyone.
I'll try to chime in.
Okay, great.
I think in the academic world, when I started my faculty position, I thought, like, or in general in academia, I thought that academia would be mainly focused, less politics involved and more science driven and based on the research that you are doing or the quality of the work. And I realized it, opposite of that, it's actually maybe sometimes more politic involved, and that was a little bit discouraging for me. I think I maybe it's kind of being connected to the previous question as well. The other thing is that in academia we are less prepared to be a good manager, and then as soon as you become transition from postdoc to faculty, you have to do a lot of management. So this will create some unknown things that we have to handle. But I guess those were the main points for me.
Thanks, Farshid. Anybody else?
I'll add another one here, if that's all right.
Please do.
So one of the big mismatches was about that impact problem. And I really felt like if I left university, there goes my impact on the world, positive impact, I should say. That I'm no longer helping science and human knowledge and all those noble pursuits that drove me to pursue science. And I couldn't be more wrong. There's literally, particularly with the National Australia Bank, there's millions of people who are directly impacted by the decisions and operations every day. And there's some really meaningful ways that you can help some really unfortunate people, unfortunate situations that they're in, and processes and all that stuff that has a day-to-day real impact. And I shouldn't give details on this in this forum of commercial things, and I certainly would not tell you if you sent me a LinkedIn message and set up a private conversation. But within my first year, within my first 6 months, I worked on a big project. I stuck my neck out and said I thought something should be done differently. And I firmly believe that the outcome of that was a bigger and more positive impact on the world than my 10 years in science. And that completely blew, that was a huge mismatch to my expectations, because I thought I was putting that behind me and giving up.
Wow, how amazing. Any other comments on this issue of mismatches between the expectations of a particular role and reality? I'm kind of interested to hear from somebody who has remained in academia, someone who's remained in a pure research role in a university, but moving from perhaps a postdoc into your first faculty position.
So I think speaking from my own experience, moving through different faculties and institutes through the university, when I took up the current role, I would say there's a bit of a mismatch, because I had certain expectations of what was expected, well, of what I was meant to do based on my previous experiences. But I think the reality is that being a group leader here at the AIBN I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's been a lot more enjoyable than in my previous school. And I think that it really comes down to the leader. The institute director is absolutely fantastic. The support that he offers for the EMCRs and the women that are in this building is beyond anything that I've ever seen before, and still beyond a lot of what I see in other schools and institutes. So there was that mismatch there, in that what I thought I was going to get, I just got a lot more of, which I think is very refreshing.
Yeah, that's great. It's great to hear that, actually, very encouraging. And as you say, it's not like that everywhere. So you're obviously in a good place. Okay, maybe we'll move on to the next question. So here we are. how important was networking in finding the position that you're in now? Actually, many of you have touched on this already to some extent. How did you come to know about the position? And in general, how important is it to develop personal networks for finding and also for maintaining the kind of position that you're in? I guess we heard from Phil before about a friend who told him about a job in a bank. So networking, how important is it in the job that you're in currently?
Perhaps I can chip in on this one. Given how many times I had to find academic jobs in the past few years, the networking was of paramount importance, and I can't express how much I hate it. And so basically, all of the jobs that I have come about from going to meetings, to conferences, and talking to people, striking conversations with the people you know are scientists that your work are familiar with, or talking to people just with drinks and discussing your research and finding out where they are working and if they are these are interesting places. A lot of the time, I found networking per se very annoying, but sharing my science very exciting. So if I had an interest in, for example, Melbourne, even years before I ended up here, whenever I visited the country, I'd come and give a talk just out of the blue at the Florey and at the University of Melbourne, at Monash, just because I wanted to know who the people are and I wanted to share what I'm interested in. And eventually, well, for example, for the Florey, I gave a talk in 2014, and in 2016, a friend of mine that I met here just sent me an email that the lab she was leaving from and she enjoyed being at was hiring a replacement for her. So that's how that job came about, and with all the previous ones as well. So it really is important, and it really is the skill that needs to be developed. But if you are not good at it, and you still need to try, but my advice would be to just go and talk about your science, because that's what we are good at.
That's great. Nice insights. Thanks, Natalia. Would anybody else like to talk about this one on networking?
If I could add to what Natalia said. So I'm also not a big fan of networking per se. I don't enjoy doing it just for the sake of it. But I think it's important, and I think there is maybe an easier way of doing it. It's just staying in touch with people you like to work with, people you've come across that you admire, and I think that just simple step can be enough for later if you need to reach out to someone to ask for advice, or maybe these people will remember you and then email you a job position in the future. I don't think you have to do a very hard work of networking just for the sake of it, but just keeping in touch with a few contacts, people who, I don't know, even people you like to socialize with at conferences, or it can be helpful in the future without doing a lot of like networking work. That can be a bit dry, and for me, I don't really like it. Having said that, I think things like LinkedIn are also useful. So having this network of connections that are not very personal, but for me, it was useful to at least have an idea of what's out there, of what people are doing, and then I've managed to select a couple of contacts to get in touch with, to find out more about available positions that I was interested in. So I guess that's my experience with networking, and not liking it, but finding a way of making it useful in in my own way.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Maria. Now I notice we have Michael has his virtual hand up, and actually I think maybe Phil as well, but let's start with Michael.
Yeah, I thought I'd speak to networking briefly. First of all, not schmoozing. I don't like schmoozing, and I don't think it really gets, I'd like to think it doesn't really get you very far in research. So I'll put that to the side. But certainly working organically with people who've got the same interests and the same approach and the same passion as you has been really, really important for me, particularly obviously we can't travel at the moment, but there was a really golden period in my career of being able to travel. Because I was working in a fairly niche area at that stage, I was fortunate to work and meet some people that I worked a lot with over the years, and also was able to travel and have a good time as well, socially and academically. And so this was great, this type of networking, and a lot of it came out of smaller workshops, like the Brain Connectivity Workshop, not so much the big conferences. So that was a real fuel for my research career. And I was very lucky to meet people that were doing fantastic work and pulled me along. The second sort of networking are people that you work with nationally. And, you know, I'm working with Jason, I'm working with Marta, I work with Alex. Sometimes it's about research, sometimes it's about important ventures like the Australian Brain Alliance or other initiatives. And I think this type of networking, and I'm involved in a number of national networks, imaging, neuroscience, and mental health. I think these are good networks too. It's not quite the same as the first sort of networks. And the third thing is what not to do. And I was fortunate enough to be brought up by my, maybe this is why, my mother with good manners, who told me just to basically be nice. And for some reason, I have often not said something. I mean, obviously we should stand up for social justice. That's really important. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about seeing someone's work that you might disagree with, or being in a little bit of a political situation and being able to take a deep breath and find a constructive solution and not poke fingers. And now that I'm a bit older, so many times people have come back into like my world in a really important way, colleagues, panelists, you know, that I am very lucky to have been able to work with through a difficult time, and that have probably supported me. And so I would say that's a really important type of networking is don't get caught up in internecine, you know, battles. Don't say things in the heat of the moment. Don't be critical of people when you can frame things constructively, because those people will come back at important times when maybe you're a little bit more vulnerable in your career.
Yeah, great. That's great advice. Thank you, Michael. Phil, I know you had your hand up, but I thought maybe if you could perhaps just hold on to that thought, and if we have some time toward the end, we could come back to you on it. But I wanted to get to our next question. So here it is. Did you have a sponsor or a mentor who helped you on your journey to your current role? I guess it might be your PhD supervisor or postdoc supervisor, but maybe it's somebody different from that. Maybe it's somebody outside your immediate sphere who helped you in some way. And how did you find that mentor? Was that an explicit thing that you went out and sought somebody, or did they find you perhaps? I'd be interested in, 2 or 3 people's experiences. Just how did you find a mentor? If you had one, did they find you? What specifically did they do for you? Just briefly from each person.
I can start. Sorry.
Yep. Please go ahead. I'll go after.
I think we'll go for Xuan first and then Farshid.
Okay. So my mentors never found me. I went out and made them my mentors. So essentially, I had an idea and I wanted to achieve a certain thing. And in order to do that, I went and picked specific mentors who were very influential in that area and got a lot of guidance from them. You know, not being a clinician, I have to work with clinicians. So, you know, as a basic scientist making it in a world that's very clinician heavy, I've found two of the biggest M&D clinicians in the world to be my mentors. And what's really good is that they mentor me in certain aspects about my career, but they also straddle the line of being sponsors. So when I'm applying for awards or being nominated for awards, or even in this current role, they put everything on the line to recommend me for the position. And that's where I am now. So I think I was very strategic in who I approached, whether they were male, whether they were female. I think it's good to get sponsors and mentors that really bridge the gender, the breadth of genders that we have, because it's really important to see things from different points of view. Because what I might anticipate something to mean will be seen very differently through the eyes of someone who may be transgender, or someone who might be gay, or a mentor who's a professor but then moved out. So I think that's what I did when I went to find sponsors and mentors.
Yeah, thank you. Farshid.
Yes, thanks. In terms of a sponsor, of course, there were always places where a PhD advisor or someone else supported me to, which is really a thin distinction between that and networking maybe. But in terms of the mentor, I think this is extremely important. I really value this. I always try to have like as many mentors as possible and try to define them, not limiting myself to one mentor. For example, in academia, I had a senior mentor, a junior mentor, a person who's like maybe one step ahead of me, and I feel that person is doing really good. So that person could be my sort of junior mentor, and maybe a senior mentor who has advanced in his or her career, and I can go and get like maybe more general feedback from that person. Or even people who can mentor me in terms from behavioral aspect, many different points. I think it's good to have a wide spectrum of mentors, but at the same time, learning to listen from them, but make your own decision. It's important. They are at the end, they are also human and they could be wrong. So I think building that confidence is also important.
Thanks, Farshid. Maybe we could hear from one more person before we move on.
May I add something? So I think that well, as it was already said, I think it's important to learn from everyone and find multiple mentors, and especially and in academia, I also have to admit that I missed that sometimes, or maybe I didn't really learn early enough what type of advice to listen to and from whom, because I think this is also important. So I think most people have, like all people have good intentions when advising others career-wise, but sometimes it's good to be able to learn how to filter information. So what type of advice to search and where and from whom. And I had to learn that, and it took me a while. But I think now when I started the company, I think I'm getting better at that, and I'm also trying to listen to anyone, especially clients, not only business developers that are more advanced, but also beginners, but also people with whom I interact, people who come to me in many different circumstances. So also clients, advisors, and friends and family, and you can learn from everyone. Everyone has some wisdom that you don't have. So I think the times when the concept of mentoring
Yeah, great advice. Thank you, Natalia. All right, I'm just aware of the time, and it would be nice to get through the questions. So let's move on to our next one. So what were the biggest challenges around the key transition points in your career? Whoops, let me go back, sorry. So for example, it might be, when you had to move country or move city to take up a position, or maybe it was moving between academia and industry or back again. Maybe it was between moving from a postdoc to a faculty position. And how did you deal with those? And maybe we could sort of hear from a couple of examples. Perhaps somebody who had to move countries or cities, to hear from somebody like that, or somebody who moved between academia and industry.
So maybe I can start.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to move to a different country. Well, I did for my PhD, but after that, I've stayed in the UK. But I found just a move from London to Cambridge while taking a new job in industry and having a small child quite challenging. So there was this period, I think, of 6 months until I felt comfortable in my new job and knowing my way in the new city, and very, very overwhelming. Yeah, I don't know if that's normal or it was that situation in particular, but it made me feel like, I need a few years of stability before doing this again. But after I would say the first 6 months, then everything went back to being just normal again and easier in a way. So that was my recent experience with moving between cities and while starting a new job, which I found a bit challenging. Everything combined, I think that was the reason why it was challenging.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is one change at a time is probably the way to go.
Yeah, I think I'll do that next time if I can.
And maybe we could just briefly hear from one of our panelists who did move from academia into industry. I guess in some ways we've already heard about some of the challenges that you confronted just in your introductions, but is there anyone else who'd like to say something about perhaps just one particular challenge that they encountered? I see Phil raises his hand, he got in, so let's go with Phil.
Be polite and raise my hand. I think the biggest one for me was an internal challenge. I really defined myself as a scientist. And it took me probably 12 weeks between actually applying for a job and accepting it, deciding to leave. And I repeatedly had these moments where things dawned on me and I really wasn't prepared for them. Like one day at a barbecue, I won't be introducing myself as a scientist. And that shouldn't matter. I hated that it mattered. And it really shook me. And I didn't realize how much I walked around like a martyr because I was in academia. Like I'd sacrificed so much for the greater good and I'm doing this for the right reasons. And there is no question. No one can fault me. I don't have to explain myself. That was really hard. I can't give you much advice on how to overcome that challenge. I'm still overcoming it. I'm also nursing people when they come in to the bank who have previously been in academia because they often have the same battle scars. But it's really tough. And when you spend so much time giving up weekends and late nights to imitate your professors and mentors and all the amazing people who have gone before you, it's a difficult personal journey.
Yeah, that's a great point. I guess the question about whether the job is who you are or is it what you do, I guess that's the struggle. That's a great point. let's move on to the next question, because there are a couple of important ones, I think. To what extent were your career choices influenced by personal factors? And again, we have heard here and there some personal factors that influenced steps in the career pathway. Perhaps it was a partner, job considerations for a partner. Perhaps it was something to do with family. I guess there must be many other issues as well. But it's that intersection between your personal life and your professional life. I'd be interested to hear from some of our panelists on that one.
Well, maybe I can just add, I've given explicitly quite a few examples of how my career was very much influenced by my partner moves, by my daughter being born. Despite all of these difficulties, I felt that it was really important for me to pursue my personal life above my academic life sometimes. And in fact, one of my mentors, my PhD supervisor, actually told me once that me following my husband is impacting my career in a very negative way, and I'll never get to where I need to be. That was a very mean comment, I thought, but I took it and I still believe that it was the right decision. So I think that in all of the career choices, I think you should be guided primarily by what you value in life and what the balance is in your life. But it's still possible. I never not wanted to do academia as my career, and I would never not do it because of my partner, but working together and helping each other was very much the part of my personal experience. And in fact, another example I want to give is my partner applied for a DECRA in the same year as myself, and we've supported each other and we both got it. And then we applied for promotion in the same year and we each helped each other and then both got it. So I think putting your personal life into your career, if you can, could be helpful rather than be an impediment.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Natalia. I'm keen to get onto these last two questions. So again, if we have time, we can come back to hear some people's perspectives on this, the personal factors. But I'd like to get on to the next couple because these are things that come up a lot. So would you say that you have a good work-life balance in your current role? How often, for example, do you work outside of normal office hours? This is something that I think many people, perhaps all of us, struggle with. What does it mean to have a good work-life balance? What is a good work-life balance? And you know, how do we kind of regulate our professional life and our personal life? So I'm keen to hear people's responses to this one.
So I'm happy to go first. So this was one of my biggest concerns when I left academia. And I think I was very maybe naive here. I thought that by leaving academia, my work-life balance would just be destroyed, which is completely the opposite of what happened. So I approached every interview I did with the request of or being upfront about having to have a really good balance between my work and then everything else. And I was so concerned that I just kept asking people that worked wherever I interviewed. And I was also upfront with, I told everyone that if the job required me to work, I don't know, 10 hours or just be available anytime, I wasn't the person for that role. And I was surprised that actually this was, at least for the roles I applied, no one was expecting me to do that. And actually everyone thought my concern was really like strange. And in fact, I think now I do have a really good work-life balance that I never had in academia. I have, it's much easier for me to work for blocks of time and then completely forget and work and just do other things. So I think it's because what I do now it has more, maybe the objectives are better defined, and the work is a bit more structured in a way. So it's easier for me to plan, and also it's easier for me to switch off at the end of the day. I don't have to come home and read more papers or things like that I used to do before. So that I just want to share that from my experience, that was something that I was really worried about, and it turned out to be much better than I expected. And yeah, that's my experience.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Maria. I think Farshid had his hand up, and then after Farshid, we'll go back to Phil, I think.
I think that it's relatively the same story for myself. By putting it on rough numbers, I think I was working around 70, 80 hours per week in academia, but since I moved to industry, it's down to 55 to 60 hours per week. But for both cases, no one expected me to work this much. It was my personal choice, but in academia, you compete with your peers, and the time and resources are limited. So sometimes you have to go that extra mile. But at the same time, I noticed that in industry, I work less, but maybe more focused and condensed and efficient. So I feel like I'm more productive. So I would say for myself as well, industry has been much better in creating a work-life balance.
Thanks. Phil, over to you.
Just wanted to share a bit of advice my first manager in industry gave me. And that really shook me. It was another one of those mismatches where she said I shouldn't be doing more than 40 hours a week. And she said that was a sign that I wasn't working sustainably, that perhaps I should have an easier job. Maybe that the job is a little bit too difficult, and that, my overachieving, my focus on all these pieces was actually a weakness. And they didn't want someone doing 80 hours. They wanted someone who could do 40 hours for 20 years. And when necessary, ramp up to 60 or 80, rather than having that as the base load. That really blew me. Wow.
That is amazing. That is amazing, and I see another hand going straight up from an academic. So I'm going to hand over to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know everyone's given academia a bit of a beating, that the work-life balance is better in industry, and I think just by the nature of academia, I think most people would expect that work-life balance is non-existent in academia, but as people have said before, it is choice. When it's a passion, it's sort of this whole idea of work-life balance. It sort of all molds into one if it's really your passion and it's where your values are. I was one of those postdocs who worked ridiculous hours on my own choice, and in my early stages as a group leader, I did very similarly. But throughout life, and this is where personal circumstances have influenced where I am now, where I just seem to be one of these people who lose a lot of people in my life, that I kind of sat back and just realized, I'm in a really good position. I'm healthy. I'm privileged to be able to sit down and think about ideas and to put them on paper and to put them out there to see if anyone's going to fund them. And when I took a step back after losing a lot of very close people in my life, I realized that, just going hard all the time was not necessarily the best thing to do. So now I say no to a lot of things. There are times where sometimes I have to work a little bit harder when the NHMRC grants come in and you have to assess them. And, there are times like that, but I don't do that all the time anymore, because I've realized that life is a little bit more precious than what I'd appreciated beforehand. I don't know whether that's something that comes with age. And so I try, and I very often now say no to a lot of things. And I wonder, if I say yes to this, how's it going to help me? Or can I actually give this role to a postdoc that's going to help them in developing their career? And if I do give it to someone else to help them develop their career, I mentor them through that process. But, you know, what I've learned through having better work-life balance is that I'm a lot more productive. When I'm here, I think a lot more clearly and things get down on paper really quickly. And so all of my PhD students and postdocs and staff are encouraged to do the same thing, so much so then when a postdoc is on leave and they come into the lab, I get all the students to push them out of the lab and then they have to go home. So everybody watches each other to make sure that we're all doing the right thing in terms of work-life balance.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for those insights. All right, I'm aware that we're already two minutes or so over time, 3 minutes over time, I think. But I would like to get to this last question if the panelists are willing to bear with me for just 5 more minutes. And for this one, I'm going to ask each of you to respond. So if you had just one piece of advice that you could deliver to your younger self, you know, when you were at a critical point in your training, what would that one piece of advice be? And I guess, you know, if I gave you half an hour to think about this, I'm sure you could probably come up with many instances, but this is just one sort of parting shot from each of you, which would be really valuable as a kind of takeaway. So who wants to go first? Who wants to jump in now? It doesn't have to be particularly profound or the be all and end all, but one thing that you think would be useful to your younger self. Feel free to jump in.
May I start?
Yes, please.
One thing that I would tell to my younger self would be listen to your intuition, because your intuitive mind is, intuition is a form of intelligence, and you have to always take it into account. And I think that career decisions that I regret, and all the decisions that I regret, are the decisions where I was only listening to my rational mind and rational arguments, and I was ignoring my intuition that was telling me otherwise. So that's one advice I would give to myself. Okay, great. So we have listen to your intuition. That's pearl of wisdom number 1. Who would like to go next?
I can go. So I think I would probably tell myself, my younger self, that just to be a bit more adventurous, maybe. So if you start feeling that academia is not for you, don't be afraid to explore what else is out there in the world waiting for you. And I don't listen to all the negativity and people who want to make you feel like you're a failure if you're leaving academia. That's totally nonsense. And just go for it. Just find something else that makes you happier as soon as possible.
Fantastic, thank you. I through this, I just got a chat message from Marta prodding me to wrap things up. Marta, if we really do, we can stop there, but it would be great just to get a very quick one-liner from our remaining panelists. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so let's quickly run through. Who would like to go next? A quick insight.
Oh, I'll just go. I'm still working on this one, so I'm giving advice to myself now. Just rest and take vacation.
Okay, rest. That's a good one. I like it. Next.
I just reflect back on those postdoc years where I did actually get to do a lot of what I really enjoy about science, which is coding, analysis, presentation, even writing some papers. So I really enjoy the postdoc science years because if you're in a good lab, you're getting good mentoring, it is a golden time. You don't have all the other imposts on your time that you get later on.
Thanks, Michael. That would have been mine as well, by the way. Okay, next, who else would like to give an insight?
I can go next. I would tell myself to stress myself less, maybe set goals, but not deadlines. And also be contact with your friends more often. They may not be around the next day.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Farshid.
I'll throw in a quick one.
Great.
Just be really honest with what you care about. I learnt the most and I got the best networking connections when I put myself out there and showed what I was passionate about, what I wanted to know, what I didn't know. Don't beat yourself up. Just do it. If people don't like it, that's pruning your network. Just as important.
I like that natural pruning of the network. That's fantastic. And who have we missed here? Natalia, did you? No, we've had both Natalias have provided.
What I would say
sure.
to myself
Yep.
is to not sweat the small stuff, because in the grander scheme of things, it's all small stuff.
Right. I like it. Okay, I'm sorry it was a little bit of a rush at the end, but I really wanted to get those sort of final insights. And so I'll wrap up by saying thank you so much to Maria, to Farshid, to Xuan, Natalia, both Natalias, to Michael and to Phil for their amazing insights. I've learnt a huge amount, and I hope that other people might have done too. And thanks also to the organisers for putting on this fantastic event. I think it's been really valuable. And I will hand over to Marta to wrap up.
All right, thanks. So I was just saying, thanks very much to Jason for doing a wonderful job moderating this discussion, and to all our speakers for being so generous with your time, and also for being so honest, sharing your experiences. It takes a degree of courage to expose your stories, and they all so different, and I think they showcase how different pathways can be equally successful and fulfilling. Yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it. And so for our community, I think I'll wrap things up now, and I'll see you all at our next event. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Marta. Bye.
Bye.